Welcome to More Than a Few Words, marketing conversation for business owners. This is your host, Lorraine Ball. And today, I want you to go outside. No, I don't want you playing games outside. I want you to get away from your computer and think about outdoor advertising because that's what we're going to talk about today. And to have that conversation, I've invited Charlie Riley to join me. He's head of marketing at OneScreen, a measurable outdoor advertising platform. He's been the first marketing hire at 6 organizations, leading marketing and sales at seed stage startups. You try saying that 3 times fast, and in organizations with up to $200 million in sales. He's a father of 3, a former CMO, top 50 B2B marketing influencer to follow. And I'm going to drop down to the very end of his bio, where he talks about the fact that he thinks onions are the least attractive food in the world. And we are going to discuss onions at the end of this podcast. But for now, Charlie, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Happy to jump into marketing for companies of all sizes and my disdain for onions.
Okay, like I said, we'll talk about the onions later for those who hang on for the end. But in the meantime, outdoor advertising, I think that a lot of business owners think that that's something multi-million dollar corporations do, politicians with tons of money. But you were writing to me about this and really explained that it's something that businesses of a lot of different sizes can consider.
It really is. I mean, if you think of, most marketers think of digital as a channel, and that spans from large Fortune 500 companies to small mid-sized companies. They can all do digital, but they can also do outdoor, which is something they may not be thinking about. And I think a lot of companies, especially smaller companies, think of billboards immediately. That you're driving down the thruway and you see a billboard. But there's a lot of executions that could be done for any size company and for different size budgets too. I think the misperception is there that not only is it going to be super expensive, but we can't track it, but we actually can track the effectiveness of outdoor advertising. So we work with companies of all sizes to build a strategy around what they're trying to accomplish. That might be brand, that might be a conference, that might be a really targeted ABM campaign. So we can help companies of all sizes figure out how to use outdoor advertising and measure it.
Cool. All right. So I want to go back to something that you said because I think that's really the crux for small businesses is outdoor advertising is more than just a billboard. And I really want to dive into maybe some of the other types of placement that a smaller business could look at instead of a giant billboard on the side of a highway. What are my choices?
There's millions. Millions might be a little strong. There's millions of actual places to advertise across the country. And we work with companies in Europe. But if we're talking about the United States, there's millions of billboards and bus shelters and things you could wrap. But really, the sky's the limit. I think the fun part about out of home is it's a creative execution matched with strategy. So we'll do things like we could wrap cars. If you are a regional company and you've got a product launch, we could wrap cars and drive them around either a conference, the headquarters of maybe your biggest prospects. So that's one execution. You can do bus shelters or bus wraps. We've even done things where you can put ads on pizza boxes and deliver those to your top 25 or 50 customers right at their headquarters. Talk about a way to stand out a little bit. So, and we also do billboards. So you could, billboards are a great execution for if you can identify, where people work and we help do that. We use a lot of data sources to understand where people spend their time and not just, a broad market. We can narrow down into a specific audience. So yeah, billboards are one thing, but there's a lot of fun ways to play with out of home and to marry the science and the art of advertising.
So I am absolutely intrigued by the idea that if it's three dimensional, if it's tangible, you can put marketing and advertising on it. And I think that that is definitely something that smaller businesses can consider, and really talking to a company that can help them find some creative ways to do it. But now I want to push you on the other thing that you said, measurable. I know that with billboards, you can get highway data that tells you how many people drive by that sign every day. But a pizza box, the wall on a subway terminal, a bus shelter, how do you begin to gauge the effectiveness of that campaign?
Yeah, your first example is great about getting driver data, and we can actually get even more specific about that. Say if it is a billboard, we can narrow that down based on what are called MAIDs or mobile IDs. So, say instead of every car that drives by that billboard, we could say if you wanted to target 25 to 34 year olds in a certain demographic that have a certain title, we can help you identify that yes, a percentage of them actually saw that. But when you get into some of those other executions, there's a couple things we can do with that. It really depends on the call to action. If you're driving them to download an app, if you're driving them to for foot traffic into a store, it really depends on what the call to action is there. So either there might be a QR code as the call to action on that ad, there might be a specific landing page on that ad. But what we can do is we'll work with brands or companies. We'll put a pixel on their website, and then we can help identify if there's lift there or not. We can build control groups. So expose those that have not been exposed to the ad, and then a very similar demographic that has been exposed to the ad, and we can show if there's an uptick in again web traffic, downloads, whatever you're trying to accomplish. So we work with their team to be able to do that, and then we can actually help them retarget back to that audience that may have seen that they're typically used to doing in digital marketing. So it really depends. I think it depends is kind of a common theme when it comes over outdoor advertising. Depends on where you want to be. Depends on how long you want to do it. Depends on what your budget is. But we can help them measure that, and we can help them find opportunities like the fun ways we were talking about to get in front of your customers.
I think this is such an important conversation to be having right now, because I know that a lot of businesses that have been spending a lot of money on digital ads, on Facebook, on Google, are seeing declining results. The space is cluttered, the algorithms are changing. And so getting creative and getting out in the real world is really interesting. If I'm thinking about creative, if I'm actually thinking about what to put on billboard, pizza boxes, are there some general rules of thumb to think about?
Yeah, for creative, I think sometimes less is more. If you have to think about the exposure, and you brought up a really good point before. A lot of brands have just been used to putting a lot of money into digital channels, and you're seeing saturation there. You're seeing just people tune out. You're seeing the cost per acquisition go up quite a bit. So that's why when we talk about supplementing those digital campaigns with out of home, they do stand out. But you have to think about how much time you have in front of that person. On a billboard, they're driving by potentially in under 5 or 6 seconds.
Mhm.
Probably need 7 words or less on that billboard, or else it's going to get cluttered. You have to think about is it on the right hand side or the left hand side of where they're going to be reading that. You have to also think about, you can't have a very long URL or a website. You can't say like website slash page slash, like nobody's going to remember that. Nor are they going to be able to scan a QR code on a billboard, because that's just not safe. And we do not want them doing that. Now, if it's a different execution, if they're doing something that's fun, like uh, wrapping an ice cream truck and bringing that to right outside of maybe a conference, little different there, because the creative should pop. It should be the brand colors. It should be subtle. You shouldn't be overly salesy there. But so we work with customers on the education of here's what you should think about from a creative standpoint. We'll actually take that. We use AI in some instances to be able to assess how much could be read on that creative, or if there's improvements there. in terms of placement, where they want to put things. But usually from a creative standpoint, there's two things with out of home. You can be fun. You can have some fun. So that's where you can get a little cheeky or kind of come up with some, unique things to kind of draw some eyeballs. But to get those eyeballs to stick, you can't expect someone to spend 5 minutes looking at a billboard or a bus wrap, for example. It's got to be quick. You have to remind people what you do. And you hopefully driving them somewhere, or if it's a brand execution, then it's just got to be consistent with wherever else you're sending them to. It can't look different than your website. It can't look different than the rest of the ads that you're using. So we advise quite a bit on the creative execution. We do mostly we work on the reporting and the strategy around building that. A lot of the brands will come to us with creative work already, and we can make some adjustments to say, hey, you might want to consider this or move these words around. But that's the fun part. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, there is a lot more I'm sure that you could talk about with regard to outdoor advertising. And I am going to suggest that if people are interested, you should hop by onescreen.ai to learn more. Charlie, thank you for being a part of the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Just to kind of reinforce what you said before, it doesn't have to be expensive for someone to consider that. We've run campaigns that are similar to digital campaigns. So yeah, happy to talk to anyone, and thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Pleasure. And okay, I do want to dive into this. You don't like onions? What? How do you
They
cook
just
without an onion?
Cooked is one thing, but if they're on a sandwich, I mean, they're very overpowering. It's I guess if you think of it from maybe a marketing analogy, it's just ads maybe taking over everything and just like in your face too much. So it's one of those things that I've just never really enjoyed. And now I get my kids to kind of joke about anytime they see an onion, they have to kind of rub it in my face a little bit.
Well, I'm going to use the marketing analogy back at you and agree to disagree. There are degrees of onions, and just like advertising, a good subtle message can work really well.
I'll take that. I like that. I can appreciate that.
Charlie, this was so much fun. Thanks again.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Pleasure. And if you've enjoyed this conversation, if you'd like to find other resources for your business, be sure to look for MTFW wherever you listen to podcasts. This has been another episode of More Than a Few Words. Thanks for listening.